Imagine being tasked with overthrowing the current government in North Korea, a mission that has left many world leaders feeling humiliated and bewildered. This is a mission whose failure could impact the entire world, not just in the present, but for generations to come. You don't have much time to think, because the longer you wait, the closer this leader gets to achieving his goal of developing tools capable of precisely targeting a specific location in the US or anywhere else in the world. In fact, you might already be too late. On November 1st, North Korea announced the successful launch of the Hwasong-19, which Pyongyang claims is the world's most powerful missile, capable of reaching anywhere in the United States. So, what options do you have? Let's start with the one that seems the most popular, at least according to YouTube comments: using nuclear weapons. Sounds simple, right? According to security experts, there are 9 countries in the world that possess nuclear weapons, including the US, Russia, the UK, France, China, India, Pakistan, North Korea, and Israel. If we consider North Korea as the target, which of these countries could actually stand against it? Currently, due to diplomatic and economic relations, India and Pakistan are extremely unlikely to oppose North Korea. China and Russia are even less likely, as they are historical allies. The UK would probably wait for someone else to make the first move. France is more focused on sanctions. Israel doesn't even confirm or deny the existence of its nuclear weapons. Therefore, it's highly likely that the US would be the only country both capable and willing to turn North Korea into a second Hiroshima and Nagasaki. According to estimates, the US has about 5,440 nuclear weapons, slightly fewer than Russia's 5,580. Together, these two countries account for over 90% of the global nuclear arsenal. No one knows exactly how many nuclear weapons the world's most secretive country possesses, but estimates range from 15 to 60. Either way, you'll see that the US is the most obvious candidate. However, things aren't that simple. We're talking about today's nuclear weapons, some of which could be 80 times more powerful than those used in Hiroshima. We're talking about millions of lives that could be lost, and that number could multiply when considering the effects of radioactive fallout, which can travel thousands of kilometers. And that's not even accounting for the possibility of US intelligence miscalculating and failing to completely destroy North Korea, leaving it capable of launching a retaliatory strike even in a state of chaos. So, let's move on to the next option. What if Kim Jong-un were suddenly unable to lead? Surely that's a cleaner approach. No massive destruction or collateral damage. All you need to do is target one man. However, pulling this off is far from easy. US law prohibits such actions against foreign politicians. Even if that barrier didn't exist, getting close to Kim would be extremely difficult. North Korea is too secretive, and external intelligence agencies have virtually no way to isolate him in a covert operation. Not to mention, infiltrating North Korea undetected is a challenge in itself. Kim has elaborate methods to ensure his safety. He only travels at dawn, frequently changes locations and schedules, uses decoy vehicles, and so on. Therefore, you'd have to rule out all traditional methods unless you could enlist the help of someone close to Kim, something that's nearly impossible. Assuming you succeed and Kim Jong-un is taken out, brace yourself for retaliation from the North Korean people. Clearly, assassinating a head of state is an act of war, and whoever replaces him, whether a member of the Workers' Party or a family member, would want to make a statement through retaliation. So, you can't just target Kim. You'd also need to eliminate senior officials, elites, and family members simultaneously. So, what about an invasion? Let's assume a perfectly coordinated invasion is planned, achieving all objectives on time with the participation of multiple nations. First, you'd need a significant amount of military assets within striking distance of North Korea. You'd need to assemble a force large enough to overwhelm the enemy. However, the problem is maintaining secrecy. A military buildup of this scale would be immediately detected by Pyongyang. Kim Jong-un knows that once the US and its allies are in position, they'll immediately target his weapon stockpiles, surge across the 38th parallel, and cripple the Pyongyang regime. His only chance is to strike first. Launching missiles at the US might be a stretch, but Japan and South Korea are different stories. Before the Allies could act, millions might already be dead. So, what about an invasion? Let's assume a perfectly coordinated invasion is planned, achieving all objectives on time with the participation of multiple nations. First, you'd need a significant amount of military assets within striking distance of North Korea. You'd need to assemble a force large enough to overwhelm the enemy. However, the problem is maintaining secrecy. A military buildup of this scale would be immediately detected by Pyongyang. Kim Jong-un knows that once the US and its allies are in position, they'll immediately target his weapon stockpiles, surge across the 38th parallel, and cripple the Pyongyang regime. His only chance is to strike first. Launching missiles at the US might be a stretch, but Japan and South Korea are different stories. Before the Allies could act, millions might already be dead. To avoid detection by North Korea, you could build up forces gradually. However, even with a full-scale attack, no one can guarantee control over all of North Korea's weapons. The North Koreans are like skilled miners. They have tunnels across the country to hide weapons deep underground. This leaves intelligence agencies with limited information. Suppose they charge in and miss a planned target. They'll lose the element of surprise. Once North Korea has a chance to retaliate, at the very least, Seoul would face its wrath. South Korea's capital is just 55 kilometers from the demilitarized zone, and it wouldn't take long for North Korean artillery to rain fire on Seoul. Not to mention, North Korea also possesses chemical and biological weapons, which could make the situation even more terrifying. The Pentagon estimates that a conflict could last 4 to 6 months, with intense fighting and catastrophic consequences. The US and South Korea could lose up to 500,000 troops in the first 3 months alone. If that weren't enough, we also have to consider the long-term consequences. ISIS emerged from the power vacuum left behind after Saddam Hussein was overthrown. A similar story unfolded in Libya following the tragic end of Muammar Gaddafi. The history of the past 3 decades reminds us that the West can remove those it deems dictators, but has never had a proper plan to fill the void after a tyrant is deposed. Further back in history, we learn that rising from the ashes can lead to an even greater threat. Now, we're talking about something worse. What if North Korea's allies decide to intervene? There are a few names on that list, most notably China. Beijing is particularly adamant about maintaining North Korea's stability. They need a buffer zone between themselves and South Korea, a US ally. If the Korean peninsula were to unify under South Korea's flag, the US could strengthen its presence in the east, something China cannot accept. US troops could freely move right up to China's border. Not only that, if Pyongyang collapses, a humanitarian crisis could erupt. Millions of impoverished North Koreans might flood across the border, disrupting Chinese society. If China intervenes, we could see a conflict involving at least 3 nuclear-armed nations. That scenario is truly terrifying. So, let's move on to the 4th method. What if you could get China to completely cut ties with North Korea? It sounds reasonable, because China is the primary supplier of food and energy to North Korea. In 2023, trade with China accounted for 98.3% of North Korea's total trade. If abandoned by China, North Korea would likely plunge into an economic crisis. Discontent among the people could lead to rebellion and the overthrow of the government. However, even economic sanctions have proven ineffective. There's one thing Kim Jong-un always tells the North Korean people: they need nuclear weapons to defend themselves against enemies. And honestly, he has a point. Just look at how Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi gave up their nuclear programs, only to end up powerless against foreign intervention. Therefore, if extreme sanctions are pursued, the people might not rise up. In fact, they might support the government even more, believing their suffering is caused by external enemies and that they must fight back. If that scenario unfolds, the heaviest price will be paid by the North Korean people. Not to mention, there's a near impossible puzzle to solve from the start. Why on earth would China ever turn against North Korea? So you need a more subtle, covert approach. A puppet leader, for example. You could arrange for Kim to be replaced by someone you prefer. However, would this new regime be influenced by China or the US? It depends on which country is more successful in infiltrating the North Korean government. The US could recruit double agents in North Korea. But like in the first option, finding such a person depends on luck. South Korea would certainly find sympathizers in the North. However, the deep divide between the two Koreas and their governments limits what they can achieve. So, you need a more subtle, covert approach. A puppet leader, for example. You could arrange for Kim to be replaced by someone you prefer. However, would this new regime be influenced by China or the US? It depends on which country is more successful in infiltrating the North Korean government. The US could recruit double agents in North Korea. But like in the first option, finding such a person depends on luck. South Korea would certainly find sympathizers in the North. However, the deep divide between the two Koreas and their governments limits what they can achieve. China seems to have a better chance, thanks to its long-standing relationship with North Korea. Beijing has maintained communication with the Pyongyang regime, and there might be individuals within it who want to replace Kim. There are rumors that Kim has purged many elites suspected of being part of Chinese-backed plots to overthrow him. One of them was his uncle, Jang Song-taek, who had close ties to Beijing. The problem is that North Koreans revere the Kim family. So if you stage a coup, you'd need to replace Kim with another Kim. But how do you find a Kim willing to overthrow their own relative? There was once such a person, Kim Jong-nam, Kim Jong-un's half-brother. Many sources claim he was a candidate chosen by foreign governments to replace his brother. However, he had no power base within the country. It's believed that Kim Jong-nam traveled to Malaysia on February 13, 2017, to meet with intelligence officials and discuss plans to replace Kim Jong-un. Unfortunately, upon arriving at Kuala Lumpur International Airport, he was assassinated. So, let's move to the final option. What if you told the North Korean people that life is better everywhere else? Give them access to outside information, which they currently lack. North Korea is the most closed-off and secretive country on the planet. However, thanks to some illegal border smuggling groups distributing leaflets or DVDs, some North Koreans might already be exposed to outside information. Taking it a step further, you could fund infiltrating radio stations or use tech companies to deliver information more effectively into North Korea. The people would see how the South is thriving while they suffer. You could plant seeds of doubt and dissatisfaction with the government. However, once again, you'd face the same trap as before. Instead of blaming the government, the people might grow even more resentful of the South and the West, believing their suffering is caused by external forces. Finally, let's consider the last option: money bombing. Literally flooding North Korea with counterfeit North Korean currency. Imagine everyone suddenly having the means to buy anything. However, This would cause prices for goods and services to skyrocket uncontrollably. Over time, North Korea's currency would lose more and more value, leading to panic. People would rush to spend their money before it became worthless. They would scramble to buy anything they could, driving prices even higher. This creates a vicious cycle leading to economic collapse. Eventually, people would turn to more stable currencies like the US dollar or the Chinese yuan. The country would have no choice but to accept widespread use of foreign currency, whether legal or not. At that point, North Korea would become more dependent on foreign banks and trade than ever before. This is a lever the outside world could use against them. Currently, North Korea earns foreign currency through various global channels, bypassing 7,749 international sanctions. The emergence of such partners only complicates the situation further. Thank you for staying with me through this very long video. Goodbye, and I'll see you in the next clips.